very much, Richard. Thanks for having me along. I'm Jim Rowe, one of the founders of the UK Fireball Alliance, fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, actually elected for my work on fireball identification and recovery, and chair of the Outreach Committee of the Meteoritical Society, because I just can't say no, and I like the sound of it. What you're seeing here is actually the arrival of the Winchcombe meteorite last year. And I'll divide my talk today into three parts. So the first part is really Winchcombe, which was before the sort of pi breakout that we had. The second is the two meteorite drops that have happened over the last month or so in the UK. And that really demonstrates the sort of power of the Raspberry Pi sort of distributed all around the country with the different cameras. And then the third bit is how to get one for anyone who's interested. Now, what you're seeing here is the Winchcombe meteorite arriving. It hits the atmosphere here and it's doing about 13 kilometers per second. The dynamic pressure really increases quickly to a point where it fragments and you get this really bright explosion. And then after a while, it's slowed down and you can see the remaining fragments, which actually end up on a driveway and in a sheep field, because at this point, they're only doing 3 kilometers per second. So if you point cameras at the sky, you're eventually going to see meteorites arriving. And so that's what we've been doing over the last 5 years or so. Here's Winchcombe again. And you can see Orion here. This is in Nuneaton looking south, and it's a different system. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theory about there being two meteorites. That's just an internal reflection within the housing of the thing, but it's a beautiful view. Here's Winchcombe arriving, seen from an old analog system, and that's from Somerset. And you kind of get the pattern there. And then arriving as seen from Hallavington in Wiltshire. Now, the interesting thing about this is this was captured by a Raspberry Pi. This is a system that costs about £200 all up, or maybe 170 plus the cost of a Pi. And Paul Dickinson set this up 2 days before the Winchcombe meteorite fell, had just got it calibrated and then caught this. This really helped us because you can see it's completely oversaturated during most of the image, but right at the end here, there's a lot of detail of the final fragmentation. And that meant that we could calculate quite accurately where it fell. So the Pi takeover and the use of these really sensitive Sony cameras means that we're much more likely to find meteorites now than we were. Here is Winchcombe as seen by 5 different camera systems, all completely incompatible, all seeing the same event, but recording it in completely different ways. So the Fripon network here is a French network, academic network. The Desert Fireball network is an Australian one, and we got it on all 5. So total chaos. But to try and make sense of the chaos, we founded the UK Fireball Alliance back in 2018. Really, it was a response to a meteorite fall in Hampshire. And we had just no idea what to do. We knew roughly where the meteorite was. We couldn't agree to even put a search team together, and then realized that we had no public liability insurance and that children might climb up on roofs and fall off, and what would happen then. So we spent about a year pulling this together, getting public liability insurance, developing protocols for what would happen, even writing press releases that we could then customize and send out, and developing software and systems to make all those incompatible meteor cameras work together. This is a little bit too much detail, but I like it, so bear with me. All the different systems are now producing data on a common platform and a common output. This is a big project that we did during lockdown, a lot of consultation, a lot of Python coding, and produced a common exchange format. It's now being implemented. Anyone who's got an even pointier head than me can actually go look at it on GitHub. So it's under UK Fall standard, and it's all open sourced, and we've put it there so that people can adopt it, and it's being adopted relatively quickly. Just finishing up on part 1 of the talk, that's the famous photo of Winchcombe. That came through to us on email at 5:34 p.m. on the 1st of March. I was one of the first people to see it. I didn't know what the hell it was. And a couple of the planetary scientists who looked at it had no idea what it was, but one of them immediately recognized it. And so here you've got Richard Greenwood and Ashley King, actually 2 days later, working on the patio. They couldn't go in the house because it was in full lockdown, and just trying to figure out what they've found. There was a big search organized that was taken by Katie Joy of University of Manchester, and the search was successful. So we found this beautiful piece of the meteorite in a sheep field, almost indistinguishable from sheep poo. So they found thousands and thousands of black glossy objects. Only one of them was a meteorite. And here is the Wilcock family and Victoria Bond, the landowner, where this meteorite was found at the Natural History Museum, donating their finds, and their Carricks, who also found meteorite on their land. Last thing on Winchcombe, and the only reason I've included this is because I think it's really cool. This is taken using the diamond light source by the Natural History Museum. So this is inside a fragment of it. So basically it's a CAT scan of a chunk of it, and you can see the green chondrules in there, which are very characteristic of this type of meteorite. But moving on to part 2, this is the pie takeover. After Winchcombe, we got so much publicity and we were so successful with planting stories about how to build your own meteor camera that there are now 151 pie-powered meteor cameras strapped to houses all over Britain. So when we got a meteorite fall in Shropshire, it was seen from everywhere. We've got all this glorious detailed data. And so we went looking for it. Now, I went up there for a day or two. These are the conditions that we're operating in. There are new crops. We're wandering around tractor tracks, just trying not to squash wheat. It was a relatively small strewn field, which was calculated because the pie-powered cameras just give that little bit of extra accuracy. But despite that, we didn't find it. So this is a very tired team of young academics on day 4 of the search, realizing that it is out there, but it hasn't been found. And poor Luke, looking very, very sunburnt, Luke Daly led the search and going home for next time. Now, since then, we've had another meteorite drop. This is one that landed in South Wales. What you see here was actually produced by, or the data was produced by Curtin University in Western Australia. I did the animation in Google Earth, which was easy enough. Using that combined data format, we were able to send off information from 2 different networks, and within a very short period, actually get this sort of calculation showing where the meteorite landed. This time around, it was a little bit misty, so it took some of the accuracy away from that sort of final part of the path. And so we weren't so precise about where it landed. So you would have seen press releases that went out 2 weeks ago and lots of stuff in the BBC about looking out for meteorites in South Wales. We've had an enormous response. My inbox has been absolutely full of photos of iron slag, because South Wales has a long and proud industrial history, which is scattered across the entire landscape. And so on the UK4 website, we've said, if it's bubbly looking, it's not a meteorite. So I think we've screened out some of it, but we're still seeing a lot. So moving on from that, I skipped forward. Here's a map of the coverage of the pie-based cameras. And this was in February 2021, just before the Winchcombe event. And so you can see there's pretty good coverage around Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, a little bit around London, and then plenty over on the continent. But given our work with Astronomy Now and with Sky at Night and BBC, this is it now. So apologies for the color change, but you can see that now we've got pretty much full coverage of England, except for a little bit around East Anglia. All these dots are camera systems that people have set up, including my 3 Pi-based systems down here in Eastbourne. There are still some gaps around some of the peninsulas. Scotland is woeful. We've really tried hard with Scotland. There've been some really big meteor events in Scotland, but we just haven't caught them. And it means that next time a meteorite falls, then if the seeing conditions are good, we can go out and get it. Now, I have to admit, this is my chimney in Eastbourne. And it's embarrassing, but you can't see it from most places. There are 5 different technologies. I've got 3 of them on the chimney. The one that I'm really keen to talk about tonight, by far the cheapest and the most sensitive, is the Pi-powered one. And that's this one here. This is an American system. This is a French system. They do great work, but they're not really suitable for most observers. They're really expensive. This is incredibly effective and really cheap. So let's talk about that. This also is on my house in Eastbourne. This is pointing towards Belgium and actually can triangulate with some Belgian cameras. And if there's an event over East Anglia, then hopefully this camera will get it. You can see the Pi 4 here in a heatsink case. It's operating CPU is at about 80–90% most of the time during the night. And so it throws off an awful lot of heat. But they operate reliably now. The Pi 3 was unreliable. The Pi 4 is fantastic. This is basically how it works. So you've got your little Pi there. You've got a camera board here, which is the Sony IMX291, a lens on it and a cable, and then all the rest is about keeping water out and keeping it powered. That is the system. The software was developed by Dennis Vida of University of Western Ontario. It's written in Python. It's on GitHub. It's open sourced. There's a very active developer community. So if you get yourself one of these cameras and you think it could be better, then make it better. Just join the developer community. Now that's above my pay grade. So what I do is I am trying to write software which is complementary to this, and which can actually take the data that's produced and then do stuff with it. But there is still development work to be done, and the question is who will do it. So we need better firewall detection, better data handling and sharing. And if you want to get one of these yourself, so we're now on to part 3, which is really how to do it yourself. The best place to start if you're in the UK is UK Meteor Network. So there's a link there. I'll show the link later on. This is a page on their website. So you can actually join up there. Joining just basically means joining the Facebook group, so it's not anything formal. And then follow their wiki that they've set up to show what parts to order, how to assemble it. There's also a lot of support coming through UKMON and through Global Meteor Network. So if you've got a question or get stuck, then there's a really nice big collaborative international group that can answer. There are more than 500 cameras operating globally. And I've been pushing very, very hard to get a lot in New Zealand. So I actually personally funded 10 that have been built by University of Canterbury there. And another 20 have been built with some support, non-financial support from Raspberry Pi Foundation, which has been very much appreciated. So really, we're going to cover New Zealand and meteorite cameras. There's also big networks in the United States, Canada, Croatia, and Australia. Dave Jones of the UK Meteor Network has produced lots of helpful YouTube videos on how to build. So the support is fantastic. You buy the bits. No matter how useless you are at putting them together, someone's going to help you and you'll get this operating. And that's it. So I see I've come in slightly under my time, which is a shock to me. I'm usually well over. But there's my Twitter, LinkedIn, and the website of UK4 and of the UK Meteor Network. And thanks very much for having me. I'm very happy to answer some questions at the appropriate time.
Yeah, I had a question. If you go back to that map where you're showing the trajectory of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one. So what sort of calculations do you do? Like how do you make use of the pi data or the camera data?
So what's happening at each of these points, you're getting a frame stack captured, which is so all the frames which have registered movement. And then you analyze the frame stack to look at what the center of the meteor is actually in each individual frame, and then compare it with the starry background to actually work out precisely what direction that point is in. So you build up a series of vectors basically from each of the viewpoints, looking at each of the frames. So each of these lines which comes up from the ground is a calculation of the centroid of the meteoroid in an individual frame of video. You can then work out pretty easily just through triangulation what the trajectory is. You can also work out the speed, and from the speed you can actually work out the dynamic pressures that have occurred at different times. You can even figure out the hardness on the hardness scale of the rock that came in to some extent by looking at its trajectory and its fragmentation history. So there's a lot of information in there. When it gets to the end of this luminous flight, it's traveling about 3 kilometers per second. It then gets blown about by the wind. So it takes 6 seconds to traverse that luminous path, but it can actually take 5 minutes to then fall the remaining 30 Ks. And so there's a lot of modeling there, which picks up wind at different layers in the atmosphere or different levels in the atmosphere, makes assumptions about the shape of the object and its density, and then tries to figure out where it fell. And this time around, we didn't have very much accuracy for the last part of the trajectory. This big Monte Carlo simulation run, and it just produced this enormous strewn field. So we just don't know where that landed. We could have done better by dead reckoning, possibly. Sorry, Rich, I kind of over-answered your question there.
Oh, that's great. So how do you know the exact orientation of the pi is and which way they're facing, et cetera?
It's random. If it's pointed the wrong way, it won't catch it. So, but there are 151 of them, and there are a whole lot of other systems as well. So someone's going to get it.
Right. So it depends on. So you can tell by the video it's taken how it's oriented with respect to the other ones.
Exactly, and then you can do the calculations on it. And if everything is well calibrated, you can actually calculate the trajectory to within tens of meters using that data. And
that last search that you showed, what was the size of that? Is that a couple kilometers by half kilometer, something like that, or what was the size?
Oh, this strewn field here.
Yes.
This one is absolutely enormous. I think it's about 280 square kilometers, which is absolutely hopeless. The Shrewsbury one was much smaller. I think that was about 5 or 6, if I scroll up there.
Yeah, that's
and so we were able to walk it. In fact, I was able to run quite a lot of the roads here. So put the running gear on and went around and recorded my tracks running the roads. But then we got into these fields here, which are, you can see this gentleman called Pierre, absolutely overwhelmed by the task of trying to find rocks in wheat, small black rocks. I found someone's Barclay card that expired in 2006, but we didn't find the meteorite.
I guess you can't use, there's no metal detectors anywhere. You can use this sort of fingertip search pretty much.
Yeah, a metal detector would just throw up so many false positives. I mean, when you look really closely at the ground for a day, you realize just how much junk is littered across the entire British landscape. It's quite a revelation.
So I have a question. You said, I think there's 151 cameras currently in the UK. If that were, say, double, how much would that improve the accuracy, or is it diminishing returns?
Yeah, there is some element of diminishing returns. there have been occasions when we've got really bright meteors and 15 cameras have got it, and you're not getting any extra data from the last 5 or so. But then if you've got patchy cloud, or you've just got a power outage on one, or the Pi's SD card has got corrupted and no one notices for 3 days, then you've got some redundancy. But what we'd be really keen to do is push them into Scotland, and then my little pet project, push them more into New Zealand, which I'm working really hard to get done.
Do you have the
Thank you.
GitHub address again, please?
Sorry, I missed that.
Do you have the GitHub address again that you showed at the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy to
Thank
go
you.
up to that. Now that's just the standard for interchange between the different systems. And there are a couple of papers there which show the consultation we did between all the networks. That's not the code. For the code, you need to go through the UK Meteor Network site, which will take you to the Global Meteor Network site, which will then eventually take you to the Croatian Meteor Network site, GitHub, and there you'll find all the code repository.
Thanks very much.
So Jim, there's quite a few questions in the chat as well.
Okay, I'll open the chat because it was getting in my way before. So, okay, what's the square on the videos? The way the system works is because the Pi hasn't got a lot of bandwidth. It actually, when it captures a fireball, it crops the frame that it's captured. So that's its best guess. It's somewhere where something's going on. And it uses that for the analysis. Later on, you can actually reconstruct the video by looking at an overall picture of the meteor coming in and then adding back the detail of the cropped squares on it. So really it's to do with the limited bandwidth of the Pi and just trying to use its processing capacity efficiently. A link for Belgians. Yes, there is a Belgian network. I think having a hunt round on Facebook is the best way. They've got a big Facebook group. Do meteorites give off anything that could be scanned for? You know, that's a really interesting question. We thought getting search dogs might be useful because some of them really pong when they come in. A lot of them are really full of organics, and they've been described as smelling like cut grass or compost. And there's one called Murchison, which fell 50 years ago in Australia. And if it's kept in a plastic bag and you open the bag, it gives off a very distinctive smell. So it's a thought, but no one's really acted on it. The frame rate, I think it's 25 FPS. And the cities, they work fine in cities. I had all these set up in North London for 5 years until about a year ago. So
that's from me, Jim. I'm up in Scotland, quite happy to try and get one installed in my house.
fantastic.
Up in Glasgow.
That would just be fantastic.
I'll maybe send you a message on Twitter.
Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, that would be a really good thing. And if you can get anyone else in Scotland to install them, then we'll go find some Scottish meteorites.
Nice one.
The light pollution point, no, they're fine. You'll get useful data. You'll get fewer faint meteors, but you'll get useful data. Processing the data to determine what to keep on the SD card. It keeps pretty much everything that moves and then figures out in the morning what was worth keeping and not. I'm not sure exactly what the algorithm is, but that's on the Croatian GitHub site as well. Megapixel of the camera, I've forgotten. I've actually forgotten. It's the IMX291, so I think have a bit of a Google up of that. Richard, are you happy with this? Me just reading through them and...
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Okay.
It's all good.
Flying a drone over the land and scan for the meteorites. That has been done in Australia successfully. they've had to take a sort of galaxy zoo approach to that, which is for the drone to throw up candidates and then humans to actually classify them. And because it's amazing how many things actually look like a meteorite, even in the outback in Australia. But yeah, there's work in process and on that, and there are papers being written on that. Infrared for the latter part of the trajectory. Possibly one thing that we're doing is working with the Met Office to use Doppler radar data. If you get a large object fragmenting, it'll then rain down over 45 minutes and it's visible on Doppler radar. And we've worked with University of Manchester, University of Leeds, and the Met Office to actually pull together some code that should work on that. All we need now is the huge meteorite fall. And higher frame rate industrial cameras. That's the basis of the Frippon system. It's a 30 frame per second industrial Basler camera. They're very expensive and they're outside the price range of most amateurs. But also you don't necessarily get better accuracy. Meteors tend to move in straight lines, and it's remarkable how few points you can sample in order to completely define a straight line, which is why when you've got the triangulation from multiple cameras, you can actually get the trajectory to tens of meters, despite that being a tiny fraction of a pixel when actually observed. And very accurate real-time clock in the capture details. It'd be lovely, and some of the really professional systems like the Desert Fireball network use GPS timing. This uses a clock chip, but it can be up to 5 seconds off. And that's a nuisance, but it's one of the trade-offs with it being really cheap. And it has a slight effect on the calculation of the pre-impact orbit, but not impossibly big impact. So that is my quick canter through the chat, and I hope I haven't missed anything there.
Oh, looks like you covered everything as far as I can tell.
Okay, so the Pi takeover, here you have it. Pi's are taking over the planetary science community, and a good thing it is too.
Can you go over just what's in the kit a bit? I saw the kit was 175 pounds. I wasn't quite sure that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What I should have done is actually put up there what the kit contains, but I'll scroll back down to the camera. So you can see, so the kit is the Pi, an extender, a timing chip, a heatsink case, power supply, power over Ethernet splitter, because you want power over Ethernet going up to the camera, power over Ethernet adapter, Pi power source, and then a stonking great Ethernet cable, which I've drawn on there as a squiggle, connecting up to a housing, then the lens and the camera board. And on the Global Meteor Network site, there's a list of AliExpress vendors who have proven reliable in the past and actually send you what you order. And that's updated time to time as a cheaper or better one is found. The cable is the only bit that's not included in the kits. Also at the moment with the Pi shortage, the Pi is not included because you can get your own at Pi Hut, but we can't buy them centrally. These are provided at cost by volunteers in the UK Meteor Network. I don't actually build them, but there's a group of volunteers who'll put them together and send them out.
What size Pi is it? Is it the 8 gig, or can you get away with the lower size?
I think you get away with the 2 gig, though I've been running the 4 just because there's a shortage of the 2s.
Right, because 2s are available. 2's been available recently, and they're just because there's no 4 or 8s.
Yeah, 2 is optimal because it's cheaper, and this is designed originally for the Pi 3. So the Pi 4 2 gig has got plenty of plenty of capacity.
Just a couple more questions in the chat there that showed up, Jim, if you can take a look
Yeah,
at those.
okay. Let's have a wee look. I'll ask the last one. Do you ever pick up weird things you can't explain on these video recordings? There have been some really, really funny ones. Someone reported a large wobbling metallic object coming in over Leeds, but hadn't realized it had a string in the number 20 on it. It was actually a party balloon that was coming in 20 feet over his camera rather than 20,000 feet over northern England. Geese migrate in the moonlight. I mean, who knew? Now I know, because I picked up so many of them. There's nothing where you look at it and think, "Oh, that's weird. They've come to see us." And I've now, shamefully, I have to admit, I have 11 cameras pointed at the sky. I'm just not seeing anything that out of the ordinary. Answering the question from Boston, is the whole point of the project to find the meteor on the ground? Actually, this project was originally designed to be really sensitive recording of meteors and looking at shower meteors and meteor streams. In the UK, we've sort of completely hijacked it to go find rocks, just because it works really well for that. So it is producing data that gets sent off to Canada to do a lot of work on meteors and meteor streams. But my prime motivation is to find the rock. The reason to do that is really geology in space. So if you can find the original orbit of the rock, which you can calculate from the trajectory, and you've got the rock in your hand, that tells you something about the distribution of material in the solar system. And it tells you about the formation of the solar system and then the migration of objects within it. So you're doing geology on a grand scale by being very carefully observing where these rocks come from and then trying to build up a picture of the entire solar system. It's a lot cheaper than building a spaceship to go get them. Now, Vinny has a question about the high endurance micro SD card. Yeah, one of the really expensive high endurance SD cards is necessary because it gets a real hammering with read writes, and we had a problem with them getting corrupted. But if you buy the really expensive ones, then they last better. And does it return results during daylight? This system doesn't. The All Sky 7 does, and actually has picked up a couple of daylight fireballs, which have resulted in meteorite recoveries. But no, this system is too sensitive. The cameras would just be showing white the whole time if you have them operating in the daytime.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. A lot of interesting conversation there too. A lot of good questions.
Okay, well, thanks, Richard. Well, shall I stick around in case there's anything else later on?
You certainly can.
There's one last question there, Richard, asking, can it run on an SSD card?
On the external SSD?
Yeah.
I'm not sure why you would want to, and I don't think it can probably. One of the joys of this project is complete standardization, and so it can run on a really cheap little micro SD card, and so there's no real reason to run it on an external expensive SSD.
Okay.
Yeah, don't know is the answer, and yeah, don't know.
Thanks very much.
Pleasure.